Trial Lawyers University, where the Titans come to train. Produced and powered by LawPods.
We got Eric Oliver, famed trial consultant Eric Oliver, who pioneered the field some 41 years ago, got started in it, and still going strong today out of the great city, Chicago. I bet it's a beautiful day in Chicago, is it, Eric?
It is, actually. A little bit cooler. It's trying to be fall.
Yeah. Everything except winter is great in Chicago, in my opinion, because I don't like below zero cold with, gusting winds. But hey, obviously you do because you moved there.
Lots of slush.
Lots of slush. So Eric, you've been doing this for 41 years, trial consulting. So how did you get started in this?
It was an accident. I was teaching verbal, nonverbal, and visual persuasion skills to marketeers, mainly in computer firms like Unisys, Honeywell, Control Data. I was working with the guys that were selling computers to the military to do, they went in the nose cones of MX missiles, that kind of thing. And somebody read my Yellow Pages ad for nonverbal communication. Turned out to be a trial lawyer who was kind of quaking in his boots. He had to go back to trial for the first time in 9 years against his most feared opponent, and asked me if I could do something to help him with whatever I was teaching all these marketeers. And I said, well, I probably can't hurt you and I might help, so come on by. We spent a couple of hours together and he did remarkably well against this guy. There was some luck involved, I'm sure. But that was enough for him to introduce me to the president of the Minnesota Trial Lawyers Association, who had been studying the same stuff I'd been studying and then teaching, neurolinguistics. So he put together a group for me, and that was when I started in March of '84.
Well, that's it. It's fascinating too because, first of all, I got my start somewhat at the Minnesota Association of Justice. My friend Gary Hazelton brought me out there about 13, 14 years ago, and I did some demonstrations on witness preparation and direct examination, and that kind of got me started on that track.
Yep.
And
Same thing
prep
for me.
a lot of
After about 2 years, the lawyers took over all my time. I didn't have time to teach marketing to the business people anymore because nobody had ever taught persuasion, influence, and communication to attorneys at that time. They still don't in school.
No, they don't teach. They teach maybe how to pass the bar exam, perhaps, but nothing about connecting with human beings or
Actually, what I've been
connecting
saying,
to.
what I told them in '84, it's still true today. Most of what you learn in law school is counterproductive to effective communication. You've got to unlearn it.
Well, and then most people's careers when they get out are grinding, paperwork, litigation.
Mm-hmm.
They don't actually even go to court. They don't see a courtroom. They don't see other people. And it just buries them deeper into themselves and their comfort level, sitting and just typing and, analyzing stuff instead of getting up and, having to look somebody in the eye and connect with them before you speak with them and make sure they understand whatever idea you're trying to transmit to them. I mean, it's a big part of it. It's not just, giving the message, but focusing on the audience and making sure that their faces and everything about them shows recognition and cognition of the message, which is
exactly.
a different aspect of it. But I know that teaching helps a lot, especially if you teach small groups, the skills of presentation and connection. And so when you first taught that first lawyer, and I don't want to say comment on this, but if you could you could help this guy in only 2 or 3 hours, I got to really get some coaching for you because it takes me days, if not weeks, to help people. But I must get some tougher students than you had in that one, 9 years
really
rust lawyer.
So what we basically did was one of the things, a demonstration I'm going to do for the groups at the boot camp. We did what I call the frame of mind exercise, but it's actually just a lot of anchoring, or what the NLP folks would call re-anchoring, finding resources whether it's professional or otherwise, in his background that he could bring to bear when he got into court, and then setting it up so it would be very difficult for him to talk himself out of using the more resourceful states. Worked really, really well.
Well, that state, not quite, you say a more resourceful state. What do you mean by that?
So most guys know these days about anchoring. What really is conditioning, you can go back to Pavlov, it's classical conditioning. What we do is usually operant conditioning, but it's the same thing. You take a cue and you take a response and you hook the two together until it's like ringing the bell for the dogs, the response of salivating, okay? Well, I've got all sorts of responses in my background, but they don't always come to the fore when I'm under stress. As a matter of fact, the research all says the more professional you try to act and the more stress you're under, the less resourceful you're going to act. But actions can be steered, actions can be conditioned, actions can be tied, in his case, to the desk, his hands, the judge's bench, and the attorney on the other side's face. So we just rehearsed over and over again, staying in a resourceful state whenever he saw or felt any of those things. And we ran it all the way through visual, auditory, kinesthetic, so that he had some solid anchors to rely on. What really happened was he was sitting there getting himself into what he considered to be the most resourceful state he could get before the other guy comes in the room, before the judge takes the bench. So he's holding on to the table the way we had practiced. He's looking at the judge's bench. He's doing all the things to keep himself in what he hopes is going to be a much more resourceful state than he was worried about. So he looks pretty strong and he's breathing kind of like the fire yoga breath, right? He doesn't notice. His opponent comes in and looks at him and he goes, "Roy, loaded for bear today?" Well, in that position, this guy could not be congruent. So he does the slowly I turn thing, looks at him and goes, "Watch out." And he knocked him off his game. So the beginning worked for him and everything went downhill from there. That's where the luck came in.
Downhill's a good thing, right?
Oh, yeah.
Downhill makes it
Downhill
easier.
is rolling easy and accumulating a lot of stuff. You know, you kick a pebble at the top of a mountain, it's not much of an event. But you look in 2 or 3 minutes later as it's rolling down the hill, it gets to be a significant event. And by the time you get to the bottom, it can be huge. It's all accumulated motivation and accumulated momentum.
Got it. All right. But before you got to your first consulting advertising gig, I assume you had to have some education to support all of these theories. And so once you, what kind of background in the intelligentsia do you have?
I just pulled it out of an orifice. The education I got is mostly hands-on training in neurolinguistics, nonverbal communication, verbal communication. My master's degree is in fine arts. I have a degree in art and design, which I didn't think was going to come in handy with the lawyers until I realized that demonstrative aids are a really big part of decent persuasion because you can access the visual as well as the verbal instead of just talking people to death. So the master's is actually in human development, which is part psychology and part education, but most of that was in training and persuasion. My real niche is how persuasion or communication affects decision-making and how you can enhance that.
And how does it? I mean, what does that mean? How?
Well, the title of the bootcamp says most of it, okay? Most of the research since 1972 says that people make decisions in a legal setting by rewriting the story that they get from the attorneys their own way. So there's a third story. It's the one that the individual is creating out of what they brought to the table and what the two attorneys are trying to instill in them. It's an amalgam of all of that, but it's still a story. You affect the story in somebody's head by how you present to them. It's not the facts of the case that decide it. It's their perceptions of the facts. So you become a manager of their perceptions. You can invite them to start building a story your way. Once you do that, it's very hard for the other guy to come in and tell them to edit it out. So it's incredibly important and very helpful that plaintiffs get to go first if they know what they're doing at the beginning.
It's a big if, obviously. Well, because the world today is like so difficult because there's so many different sources of information that, people have to find a way to figure out, okay, what's the information that I connect with that kind of relates to me that I think that I can, you know, kind of incorporate to whatever, with the caveat, of course, it's like people, like so many people that I train and coach, they're like, oh, this doesn't feel comfortable for me. I'm like, fuck, what the hell does that have to do with anything? I'm like, walking wasn't comfortable for you either at one point in your life, but you managed to fall a whole bunch of times and decide, you know what? I'm going to keep learning to walk because it's a skill I need to have to get through this world at some, deeper level. And so, and somebody's like, well, this is not, and somebody said, this is the way I do it. I'm like, and I'm watching, I'm like, that's why you're here,
As
okay?
long as you're also
'Cause that's the way
as
you do
long
it.
as you're also deciding the case, feel free. Go ahead and do it your way, right?
Right. That's the way you do it. When you said that, most of what you learned was from experience
Mhm.
and experiential learning. Say more about that, because and I think especially in today's world, like the experiential learning might be a little bit, maybe underrated. Because,
You think?
anyways,
The
yes.
difficult part about all of this, and the first marketing pitch I ever used was the best prepared case can be torpedoed by a poor presentation. Your presentation, how you sound, how you look, when you do it, where you do it, what you point at while you're doing it, the looks of the thing that you're pointing at. All of those things help you manage the perceptions of the people you're trying to get to decide your client's way. All of that has a structure. Now, the way we start it, because you want a foundation that you can always go back to and always reference immediately. We start that by building it around a story. So we set up a story in all of the natural traditional ways. It's 3 steps. It's got a certain number of frames or topics in the middle of it. And we storyboard that with demonstratives as well. So you're hitting everybody in 2 channels as you go through the delivery of your story. The sequence is incredibly important. Most people, the sequence of their story, actually, most people's stories disappear. The first witness sits in the stand. I used to tell people to, build a little shrine like the ones they have on the side of the road where people got hit. Just put all those flowers and little crosses in front of the witness stand because that's where your story goes to die. Unless you're careful, unless you know how to carry over everything you put together in an opening statement and invite your witnesses to continue reinforcing it. It's all about anchoring and reinforcement. Anchors set up frames. It's like the nail in the wall that holds up the actual picture frame. It's the very same thing. You get an image and a word that's attached to the response you want that's in the frame. So the first frame in our stories, for instance, is the risk that anybody in the plaintiff's position faces under the circumstances that the defendant controls. Whatever that risk is, we've got an image for it, we've got a phrase for it, and then we've got the elements of the story that go with that, that you deliver 3 times. First, assuming you get it in jury selection, but you don't talk about the risk in the case, you talk about the risk of each of the individual potential jurors. What risk do you face at work, at home, or at play? How do you handle that? What's been your success? Where have you failed? Really, what we're looking for is people that are primed to tell that part of our story our way to themselves. So you voir dire on the story, not their damn zip code or what they do for a living, because that doesn't give you anything. Demographics do not do anything in jury selection. What you're looking for is somebody who's ready to tell at least parts of your story your way to themselves if you invite them nicely. Then you go through each of the frames like that through voir dire, using their experience to find the folks that are resonant with your case story the way you've put it together. We learned that from focus groups. Then you get explicit. You stand up and do the opening statement and you go through the exact same sequence of frames with the visuals attached and all the language that you got people used to in voir dire. They don't recognize that you're going through the same topics because it's too many and too long, and voir dire gets confusing. But a part of them recognizes that it's the same feeling that you got as you went through this frame to that frame to that frame. So you go through the risk, the rules that protect us from that risk. What does it look like when you do it the right way and follow all those rules? And what did these idiots do instead? What's the wrongful conduct about? You go through those steps in opening, it feels familiar because they know you just went through that same sequence in voir dire, but they don't know it consciously, which is good because most decisions happen outside consciousness first. We actually realize a decision, not so much making it.
The realization, the unconscious decision.
Yeah, it's exactly right. People will go, okay, now I have a feeling. I know which way I'm leaning about this story. And then they'll start making up reasons why it's a good idea. It doesn't work in reverse. It doesn't work the way the system is set up, unfortunately, which is, okay, I take all of these objective facts, I look at them objectively, I have no connection to any of them until the whole pile is complete. They sprinkle a little law on top, shake up the container, and out comes justice. This is not the way people make decisions. We don't rationalize it. We don't weigh the pros and cons. What we do is we rebuild a story. And before they're finished presenting it, I develop a leaning. I feel like I know which way it goes. It starts with a feeling. And you can see it happening if you're trained to look for it. Most times in focus groups, about midway through the day, about 2/3 of the people have indicated to me that they know they know which way they're going to go unless something really major happens. Same thing's true in trial. It is not true that everybody makes their decisions right after opening statement. But you can get so far ahead in opening that they can't catch up.
That's kind of always the goal,
Oh,
isn't it?
hell yeah.
A great opening that embeds the story that they cannot be. It's funny you talk about the unconscious and the decision making there, because I used to have before the pandemic, I used to teach a different program called Trojan Horse
Yeah, I
Method.
heard about it. You
Yeah,
never
people would be
invited me.
well, it was a different kind of program. It was actually, I did it for like 6 years, 7 years, and I don't know, probably taught maybe like 600 people, 700 people. And I only knew what I knew, which is all of our current states of our lives. We only know what we know. And, if we're professionals, we put our full effort in to try to learn just the next step, And every time I do a Trojan Horse program, I'd be like, and some people would teach me, like, I'd be like, best program ever. Like, this day I'm like, absolutely, because we learned from the last one. So, of course, this one's going to be better. Just like we just did the Joe Freed Bootcamp on Huntington Beach at the Passaic. It was, amazing. And it was the best one ever. And then somebody's like, is the next one going to be the best one ever? I said, probably.
Probably.
Because, I made some mistakes here. I did a lot of things, really well. But the whole concept is every time it has to be better.
Yep.
If it's a focused, if it's it's just like TLU Beach. You were there, this year. And I thought, I don't know how many conferences you've been to in your life, but I've been to quite a few of them, over the last, 30 years? 30, I don't know, 30 years of being a lawyer, but like that Huntington Beach one,
It was pretty good.
it was pretty awesome. And next year,
It'll be better.
because I got to because next year, because like the one thing that, it's kind of cold out there at night. And so this year I'm going to move the parties like indoor, outdoor, and like around the pool area and the restaurant. That pool area is beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
It's not even used. I'm like, that's crazy. I've been there 4 years. Didn't use it. I got a whole new level of networking, socializing, and besides the great learning, because like the great learning is a given at TLU, because there's 4
True.
lecture tracks, 8 workshop tracks.
Yeah, I'm going into my 41st year. I think I've almost got it down. We'll see. I'm still improving.
Me too, and it's like, I remember I was talking about with Panish one time about my next, he goes, Ambrose, the only person you're competing with is yourself. All right. I'm like, well, I got to compete with somebody. I got to make it fun, or it doesn't, or, and also I feel like a real commitment or obligation to the people that come back every year to like honestly, like try to blow their minds every time. Like, okay, how can this be better than was last year? Because, like buying out the hotel, the entire hotel makes it unique. Everybody there, it's like you're almost back in college. You open the door, the person get out. It's like, they're a trial lawyer, or somehow, and so that's like or connected with the group. So it's easier to have conversations in the elevators and in the restaurant when everybody there is with you. So it's just like, besides the classes and stuff. So just want you to know, we got it dialed in for next year, Mr. Oliver, June 3rd through 6th. I know you spoke with this year. What did you talk? You talked with Scott. Actually, One of
You had
the
me do 4 programs if you count the one with Scott.
See that, buddy? What did you in Huntington Beach? You spoke with Scott, and what else did you do?
The
I
2
can't
big
remember.
factors I want to start with at the boot camp too. The 2 things that I've been obsessed with since about 2017. The 2 biggest factors that affect how well people are going to accept your persuasion and your attempts to manage their perceptions. Number 1, there's a group of people, just under 50% of most of the jury pool out there, that have a whole bunch of assumptions about the way the world works, and it affects the way they approach the job of civil trial juror. They think the game is rigged. They would rather decide against a defendant than for a plaintiff. They think that wrongdoing should be knowing wrongdoing, like a punitive case, not just negligence. They think that damages need to be the deserved consequences of that knowing wrongdoing. And they all have one big fear in common, and that is that the people in power, the people that control outcomes, don't have my interests at heart. That group of people are the most highly suspicious bunch I've ever seen in 40 years. And they're cohesive. You'll see those assumptions come out in focus groups and in jury selection with these people. They just do it between the lines because they're really unspoken assumptions. It's not a set of beliefs that they've thought their way through. It's a set of reactions to the way the world is and the way they perceive it. Well, the problem is they bring those into court with them. The great thing is, if you align the development of your story and then the delivery of your story with those assumptions, in other words, you deliver a story against the defendant instead of for your plaintiff, instead of asking her to put a hand out to your injured person, you say, how'd you like to hit back at these people that cheated to get ahead here? Well, that's exactly what these folks are ready for. So if you align your story with the assumptions they've got, they will fight to the death for the verdict for your client. If you violate their assumptions, if you contradict them, they'll hurt you for it. That's only half of the panel. The other big factor is impaired attention, and that affects every single soul in the courtroom. And it's going to be around for the rest of our careers. It's only getting worse, not better. And it comes out in 3 different ways. It's not just short attention span anymore. It's true, it's shorter, it's not as long. It's also a little bit more feeble. It's not as strong. People can't concentrate the way that they needed to in days before. I mean, when was the last time you were reading a book for 2.5 hours and it felt like only 10 minutes? I mean, it's difficult to get to that level of concentration these days. It's very difficult, actually impossible to keep it. But the worst part is attention is fragmented. We are distraction-making machines. We don't need our phones to do it because we've trained ourselves to distract ourselves, but the phones do a lot of it too. So if you go into a presentation and try to get people's attention, there's 2 things you need to know. You're not going to keep it. And being able to tell when you've lost it with certain people so that you can regain it and have ideas right at hand on how to regain it, that's going to be a core element of any persuasion you try to do these days, because they can't help themselves just by saying, I'd like to pay attention now. You have to help them regain that chance. And you can do it in any number of ways. There's about 24 ways I talked about at the beach, and we'll do the same thing at the boot camp.
Of course, give us an example of some of those ways
Uh,
of the 20, not all 24, but the most
well,
ones at the top of the
we've
list
already
of how to
talked
get the
about one of
attention
them.
back.
That's consistency in the sequence of your story. The more consistent you are in repeating that sequence through your witnesses, the easier it is for somebody that has impaired attention to follow the thread of your story. But if you dump the sequence for an hour and a half to cross-examine a defense witness because you feel like you can beat the heck out of him, and you go off script and off the sequence, you're going to break up their ability to follow your own story and reinforce it in their heads. Everything comes down to how are they receiving the story and what can I do to help them perceive it better. The second thing, of course, is what Joe Fried says, among a lot of other people. You need to shorten the trial as short as possible. 30-minute opening statements. And if you can get away with a day or a day and a half presentation, including jury selection, do it. Try never to go over a Friday into the next week. All of those things will affect the way people's attention is placed in your story and applied to it. And unfortunately, there's a lot like, primacy and recency. Recency isn't what it used to be because of this. Because when you get towards the end of the day, or when you first get the first morning break or Friday afternoon, used to be everybody said, okay, make sure you have some big guns that you can shoot then, that in evidence that leaves them thinking about that when they break. Well, unfortunately, these days, the closer you get to a break, like a lunch break, the more distracted people are. They're less attentive at those moments than they are for the rest of the day. You don't want to throw valuable stuff at them when you know pretty darn well they're not going to remember it. See, the problem with inattention is that you can't deliberate about something you haven't received. And if you miss it because your attention is distracted, you don't get it. The research says that it takes about 20 minutes to get all the way back to a serious focus and attention on a task that you had. It takes about 20 minutes, a little bit over 20 minutes, to get all the way back to full attention on a task that you get distracted from. The reason it takes so long is because we distract ourselves an average of 2 more times on the way back. That's how endemic it is. If you know that, you're forewarned and you're forearmed. You'll be watching for people to lose their attention so that you can grab it back. One of the most profound ways of doing that is the first thing I ever taught to a group of attorneys. And it's come back into the fore now because you have to have a tool that's always going to get attention back as fast as you need it. It's mirroring. Nonverbal communication is the solution to impaired attention. So visuals, mirroring, nonverbal communication, embodied communication, priming, like you guys did a couple of weeks ago, all of those things help draw their attention back to the points you want to make. But you got to be ready for them to drop their attention because it's going to happen. Those two factors, the post-truth deciders with all their unspoken assumptions about, folks that don't care about my interests, that are in charge of everything up there, those guys, plus the inattention, the impaired attention, they work together, unfortunately. If you arouse my suspicions, because these guys are the most suspicious people I've ever seen, right? Then I'm going to distract myself and go off and build a fact-free story about you and your client that you're not going to like. If I get distracted in my attention, I also am going to feel like, oh, wait, something's going on, and I'll make up a story again. The thing that's in common is people have a very, very loose mooring to the facts these days, worse than ever. So we need to
You're telling me.
Yeah, so we need to bring them in and help them perceive of the facts, the ones we like, as strongly as possible so that they can retain it no matter what happens as far as their attention goes. And it's a challenge, but it's not that hard. It just takes a little bit of effort and practice, like These aren't things,
Practice.
these aren't things you can tell yourself to do.
Right. And especially under pressure.
Yeah.
People are like, oh, I don't get nervous up there, standing up there in front of me. I'm like, okay. Keep telling yourself that until you stand up there and these people stand up.
I have to be confident.
Even in the workshops, I can see their hands going like this.
Yep.
Most of the time. They're like, I'm much calmer in court. I'm like, of course you are. When there's hundreds of thousands of dollars of your money and a judge yelling at you and the
client staring in the back of the neck.
Much more relaxing being in the courtroom. Sure.
I think that we're all selfish. We can count on that about being an animal. It's a selfish, self-serving animal. So let's use that to our benefit.
So you just brought up a concept that I talk about often, and that is mirroring.
Right.
And, because my interpretation of mirroring is really like leading people's emotional states. So when you say, when you stand up, look everybody and your face is neutral, then you're like, good morning, everybody. And you look around and look at each person in the eye with, the same slightly warm face that you would have as if a friend came to your house and or you ran to a friend and you
Right.
say, Eric, what's going on? Right? First it's recognition, then it's like, oh, we're a friend.
Right.
Hey, and then your face lights up, and then and then your face lights up. Hey, Dan. And
That's exactly it. The feeling you get when somebody mimics some of your behavior is that recognition feeling. That's the way we've talked about it for years. The trick with rapport is that it has very little to do with language. You can't talk your way into rapport. You know this, okay? You wouldn't do an open face, eye contact with each juror before you go back to the next juror. You wouldn't do all that stuff if you could just tell them to pay attention and have a connection with you, right? These people don't like to be told what to think more than ever. So rapport has to come from the actual source, which is it's a physical event. You watch people that are getting along with each other and they'll mirror their behavior. This guy will sit back, the other one will sit back 2 seconds later. If they make a connection at a bar that two people that just met, walk in and watch them, okay? If they connect, they'll get into harmony with their behavior. Their arms will move together or with a second apart. Their faces will change the same way. They'll tilt their heads 1 or 2 seconds apart from each other. This is really important when you get a jury in front of you because there's going to be 1 or 2 or maybe 3 leaders in that panel. And you can tell the leaders by how many people are following their behavior, how many people have connected with them at the nonverbal level, which is where it all starts. You don't connect with people through language. You can enhance rapport with language. You can break rapport with language, but you can't create it with language because it's a physical event. It's naturally occurring. Whenever people have a connection and they're engaged, they will be mirroring each other. All we're doing is pushing the river a little bit and starting with mirroring.
so, but one aspect is, because you mentioned training in NLP, which stands for neuro linguistic programming, and that's a term that's batted around quite a bit in the trial lawyer world. Somebody's like, "Oh, I'm applying NLP to this." Oh, they said like buzzwords. Oh, I need to listen to it now. But what, first of all, NLP, like, how did you get introduced to it, and what is it?
I was doing chemical dependency, family therapy counseling in a couple of institutions in Minnesota. My boss said, we're going to California for a month to study this stuff about anchoring and conditioning. It's called neurolinguistic programming. It was a 30-day long training program with the founders of the model. What it really is an alphabet for nonverbal communication. So they give you all the components, the broken down components, and they show you how to use it here, there, and yonder. But a couple of their main things are stuff that are familiar to everybody. Framing and anchoring are NLP techniques. They've just gotten into the zeitgeist, so people don't recognize where it came from, which is fine, because there's a lot of stuff that should be forgotten about the early NLP stuff. But some of it is absolutely valuable, and that stuff has basically percolated into most persuasion trainings, whether you call it that or not. Rapport, anchoring, framing, visualization, all that stuff, those are the components of NLP.
And who did you study with?
Yeah, I was lucky enough, as usual, when something really, really volatile gets going and it's very, very popular, the group that starts it, the band usually breaks up. Well, I got there just before the band broke up, so I got to see both of the founders and all of the secondary people, the whole crew, before they split and went their separate ways. The 2 guys that started the model, their names are John Grinder and Richard Bandler. After I got all of the training I could in the organization, in the regular trainings, I interned with Grinder for about a year, working mainly on applications for chemical dependency, because that's what I was doing for a living at the time.
Well, good thing about the world now is it probably allows a better life to consult with trial lawyers on trials and addicts on their recovering their addictions.
Yep. Well,
Just taking a wild stab at it.
there's a few crossovers, I think.
A few crossovers. It's like,
Well, the same
I
thing
meet
that,
somebody, it's like a 3rd grade teacher. I'm like, or like a special needs teacher. I'm like,
yeah,
I have a crossover. I got special needs trial lawyers. As soon as they stand up, they're like, most of them are like, and and it's so funny because like when I'm training, when we do these, trainings and coaching. See, look at this. Actually, right behind us here. That's the main
There it
dojo
is.
right behind us. So that's why I bought this place, just so I could run my little coaching, little stuff. Little few people at a time. It's a nice view. Got to have a good view when we're working.
yeah.
Right? I can't have like.
Like the blue room at Paseo.
Yes,
That's a
that's
really
nice.
nice
That's where I like
room.
to teach it. Plus, it's much smaller, and so it makes it look more full when I'm teaching. So I'm not, Brian Panish or Joe Fried or
Nick
Eric
Rowley.
Oliver. I'm just a Nick Rowley. I'm an up and comer. So I like to have, like 12 people in my class. This is great. This is perfect training for me.
Well,
So that's
no matter
fantastic.
what spoke of the wheel you come from, okay, the center is still how people make decisions and how they're influenced to do that in one way or another. That's a pretty small handful of things to work with. I mean, if you really break it down, people have 3 channels to get your message in: pictures, sounds, and feelings, sight, sound, or words, and sensations. That's pretty much it. Those are the higher cortical functions, okay? So whatever happens in their brains happens with those 3 blocks of experience. So one of the things that we insist on, and one of the things I'll definitely be pushing at the boot camp, is to have 2 channels, not 1, as you deliver your story. So years ago, we started using demonstratives. I'm not talking about charts or graphs or bar charts. What I'm talking about is illustrations to frame each of the major points of your story. So half a dozen frames that go in sequence. And you use the demonstrative to introduce the evidence so that that becomes the anchor for that part of the story. It's basically like chapters in a book.
And so you have to practice in the deposition. You practice in motion hearings. You practice at the grocery store. That's why you have a family. You practice on them. You have to keep the skill up or it erodes. It's simple as that.
Somebody give us an overview of this case.
Or I call wowing it. And what I mean by wisdom of the wise is, why are we still right in spite of this fact?
These are just some of the clips when I was cross-examined 10 years ago, remember that.
About 11 o'clock at night, and he leaves this message. I got a brilliant idea. Every conversation he starts, I have a brilliant idea.
But welcome, everybody. We've got a good crowd here today.
Got it. And so we were talking about, so the boot camp model here, so people listen to kind of understand how it works. So it's limited to 10 participants, be 2 groups of 5. And so those 2 groups of 5 will stay together for the entire time. So that way they're each kind of like creating a mastermind group around working on their own cases when they're working with you on their cases, because you'll work for, maybe like 3 hours with each group each day, like an hour and a half in the morning, hour and a half afternoon with each group. So that way they're just working the different parts of their case. And you have a form that people will be filling out, just like similar to give them if you're consulting with them.
I've already sent it out to some of the earlier registrants.
Right. And so that way they get it filled out. They understand, okay, you can understand their case, and then people can understand each other's cases before they get there. So, that's kind of a key component. And the other key component, too, is that there's, that's one aspect of training is getting the right story.
Right.
But the other aspect of it is learning how to be a great storyteller, which requires practice, requires repetition, requires physicality, because you have to control everything. And that takes practice.
A lot.
And so we do about 6 weeks of Zoom meetups prior to the event so that people, have a really good foundation of the content of the materials that we're going to be practicing, in the realms of, because in my looking at trial over, and learning to be a trial lawyer, I really have come to the conclusion that there's really 4 really foundational corner blocks of trial that are somewhat very related but separate and separate skills. And one being the the monologue, the performance skills, basically, which is opening statement and closing argument. You're the performer, like sort of like a stand-up comedian. You're the connection between the story and the audience. You know, unlike an actor who doesn't have to connect with the audience. So that's the performance skills. So that's, you know, the use of visuals. That's, you know, all the skills of eye contact, emotional state control, voice control, hand movements, the ability to create space or, you know, create the illusions that we all do when we tell stories from our own lives. So that's one aspect, right? Key aspect. But there's also the other aspect, which is the, you know, the dialogue, which is the voir dire, which I think is most challenging for most people, especially like the first 5 minutes of it, right? Because it's like every relationship, those first few, you know, that's what they say, you never get a second chance to make a first impression. What, you know, and people that get, you know, haven't like thought through and practiced those first 5 minutes so that they come off the same way every time, that's crazy to me, you know? But, you know, and that's one of the things that we, you know, really teach and focus on in the voir dires is to learn the skills and to learn how to understand the rhetoric of voir dire so that you could, you know, really perform and connect on that first 5 minutes so you get the connection going, but also really understand but in the voir dires and those first 5 minutes, you really embed the skills of the eye contact and state control and, you know, and so that's
it's just,
another aspect.
That part of voir dire is as much presence as it is content.
Oh, it's as much as probably more. I mean, you know, when people stand up and say, "Good morning, everybody," and they got this stern face and don't look at people in the eyes, it's like, doesn't sound like a very good morning. Sounds like a shitty
You're
morning.
going to have to
Even though
follow
you're
the
saying
law
good
if
morning.
you stay here.
Right. Or, you know, like they, you know, some of these lawyers seem like basically cross-examining jurors. Well, and I'm just
now,
like, wow.
To be fair, that's the only thing that lawyers practice. So they fall back on that habit when they get into voir dire, which is, of course, the worst possible thing you could do in voir dire is to cross-examine a potential juror. It's like cross-examining your client in direct. But if you don't have the other skill of having an open conversation, not being afraid of an uncontrolled answer coming back at you and maintaining rapport with a person, no matter what comes out of their mouth, you're going to be in trouble.
Right. They say something like, you know, I think trial lawyers are just greedy
The scum of the
pigs.
earth.
And you're like, what? Like, you know what? I can understand how you could feel that way. I know a few myself that I feel very similar to you, but what's behind those feelings? Some experience you might have had. And so
that's definitely what you want to do. You want to argue with the guy. I got a short story from Missouri. There were 3 neurosurgeons on trial. No, they were cardiothoracic surgeons. And during voir dire, their lawyer stands up, the defense attorney stands up and tells a crowd of about 45 people. Now, of course, these people save lives on a daily basis. They're very important people. They're not going to be here for the trial, therefore. They'll come in every now and then, but they just simply can't be here for the trial. Now, is anybody going to hold that against them? And this guy in the back row raises his hand and says, let me get this straight. He says, you're going to make me leave my job, leave my family, get paid $14 an hour to sit and listen to their trial, and they don't even have the respect to sit here with me? Yeah, I have a problem with that. And the worst possible thing, the defense attorney starts to argue with him. But don't you understand? You got to understand. And of course, now other hands start going up and people start supporting the guy in the back row. The trial was over before my guy even got a chance to open.
that sounds like a good thing from our side of the block.
Oh yeah.
From our
you
side
can't
of the block,
always
that's a
count on the
good thing.
defense to screw up. Although it's true that in every really big verdict, the defense helps somewhere along the line.
Oh, I agree, because I've been involved, in a lot, kind of watching, breaking cases down, consulting, and it's always the defense. I mean, the first real big verdict I was involved in was about $25 million about 12 years ago, and that was a lot of money back then.
Still is.
And it was up in a place called Bakersfield with my buddy Connell Doyle, and the defense attorney was so bad, I was just like, I mean, the guy couldn't have been. I remember our life care planner was a paraplegic, so she was in a wheelchair. So he said to the judge, "Is it okay if I, just pull up a chair next to her and question her like that, so I'm on the same level?" And the judge's like, and my co-counsel's like, "I'm good with it," because it was like such a condescending move, and the guy looked like such a clown. I mean, it was great, but it was I was just like watching this train wreck. I'm like, wow, I'm glad that train wreck's on the other side of the tracks and not my
In
side of the
slow
tracks, 'cause
motion,
that is
right?
fucked up shit. But those skills, but also like you said, the cross-examination skills. I mean, people think they're practicing cross-examination, but they're just asking questions with no intentionality of their
Or just arguing.
hands, their voice, their eye contact, where they're looking. Most people never use a flip chart in cross-examination because they're like, oh, my writing sucks. I'm like, yeah, everybody's writing sucks until you practice on a flip chart. That's why you practice, you ding dong, because your writing does
If that
suck.
was the toughest
And
skill
so,
you had to learn, you're in
right.
great
I'm
shape.
like, but also, the skill of witness preparation / direct examination, because that's the one that I think that is one of the most overlooked skills, especially, for young lawyers, because I do some, a fair amount of training, for law firms. And like, where do we start? I'm like, start with witness preparation, because if your young lawyers can prepare those clients, even on those small policy cases, to really, first of all, they'll never learn the story unless you learn how to
Ask
get the
questions.
story from the person, right?
Right.
I mean, they'll never learn the story. If you don't know the story, how can you really connect with the person or the story to really be any type of advocate? But then the person's not even comfortable telling their own story. And so they get into a depot and they just, say whatever because they're scared. Like, don't talk too much.
Right.
Just ask the questions that are answered. Don't volunteer
Don't volunteer
anything.
any information.
Keep it
He's
short.
not your friend. If you can answer
Right.
yes,
Next
no,
thing you
or
know, the
maybe,
person's
do
just-
it.
Person's just tight as a rock and like scared, and they're like, and then the lawyer gets mad at them
Right.
for fucking up the depot, and now they can't settle
Then
the
they
case.
fall-
And it's like
yeah,
they got
and then they fall
$50,000
back
in medical
on
bills.
the worst possible choice, and it's against their professional ethics, is to script all their stories because you want to be in control of it. The exact opposite. You don't know the script until you ask them about 400 open-ended questions, and they finally get comfortable enough to tell you, here's the real story. Ask the wife of a guy who's catastrophically injured when he's out of the room after she's warmed up to you. I'll bet there are some things that you have seen that are different in him now that you haven't had the heart to tell him about yet, aren't there? That'll get you some great damage information.
Right. So those are those are kind of the skills that I'm talking about. Skills as opposed to strategy.
Correct.
So,
Yeah.
and I think that, I got kind of fortunate to sit in this position during the pandemic, but on, webinars and not podcasts, but interviewing and breaking down some of the greatest trials and verdicts, and, and trying to figure out what they have in common, right? Like, how do some people get these massive numbers all the time, no matter, with cases that you're like, how'd that guy get that on
Through
that
that
case?
with that close.
Right. That doesn't but, so much of it has to do with, these skills, the skills of connection, how much they focus on the jury. And, and the challenge is like, you could ask, I could ask you, in fact, I will. You've worked with probably, how many lawyers would you say you've worked with in your career? Hundreds?
Thousands.
Thousands, right. And some of them were great trial
Yes.
lawyers, right? Right. They consistently got great verdicts, 7 or 8 figures, obviously great figures, all depend on the case. So all these lawyers, if I said, Eric, what would you say it takes to make a great, let's say my nephew, I always use my nephew Harrison because I like to give him props. So people are like, how's your nephew? But anyways, he's just been a lawyer for a year and he wants to become a great trial lawyer, but of course, needs guidance, right? Because there's no formula. There's no book that,
You're not, you're not learning this in law school, and you're not learning it in
Right,
most
you can't.
CLEs either.
No, well, you're not learning. I mean, and most CLEs are lecture based.
Yeah.
Okay, there's a limited amount. You can't learn a skill, but you can't learn to play golf by watching Tiger or tennis by
Yeah,
watching
you can't learn to
Venus.
fly a plane by reading the manual.
Oh, trust me. Like I'm taking flight lessons right now. I just had one yesterday morning, and
That'll scare you.
and I hadn't had one in a couple weeks because I've been, busy traveling and working. But like, just getting back into that cockpit again, it's like,
Oh, yeah.
let's say there was a little bouncing on the runway yesterday as I'm trying to find that air cushion coming down, and it's like, but there's, between the altimeter and the and the power and the pitch, and like there's so many things going on, and obviously in a plane, especially when you're the pilot, it's a fairly stressful process. That's one of the reasons why I did it too, though, because my buddy was getting a new plane. And it's like, dude, you want to buy my plane? I'm like,
No.
no. Why would I buy a plane? He's like, don't you want to fly? I'm like, no. He's like, have you ever flown? I'm like, no. He's like, well, come down to West Palm and try it out.
Oh,
And see if you
dear.
like it. I'm like, okay, why not? And so I took some lessons with his instructor. I'm like, okay, this looks like fun. I think, but it's obviously pretty complicated, but but it was part of like a personal challenge too, which I'm still in the challenge because I don't have my pilot's license yet, but you got to have consistency of training these high level skills, just like trial lawyering, because, even the best of them lose it. I mean, I remember going to trial with Panish on this case during just like 2 years into the pandemic, or I was like maybe long into the pandemic, and I remember the first day, Panish is like, damn, fucking rusty. He's like, this is what happens when you don't do anything. I'm like, hey, man, I'm not anybody to say anything. Panish is rusty. But it was kind of funny. He's like, I got to get back in there. I'm like, this thing's only lasted for an hour, Ambrose, okay?
Yeah.
I'm like, absolutely, Mr. Panish, whatever you say, sir. But it's like it happens. These are perishable skills, too.
Well,
and when people are going to
and
trial
if you
once
don't
every 2 years.
practice, it's not going to be there for you. But they are also learnable skills. A lot of people think, oh, I'm just not a natural communicator. Oh, he's got a great personality. He's so powerful. He can take over the room, blah, blah. You're not born, well, some people are, but most people who do well aren't born with it. They practice their way into it. And it's just like any other physical skill, like martial arts or sports or whatever. The basics, if you practice them and they get to be natural for you, give you the jump to the next step, which is to make it look like it's completely natural. It's happening in the moment, even though
There's
it's
no
not.
effort. Right. I mean, it's like I tell
But
people that.
you got to pay your dues. You've got to practice the basics or you're not going to get to the next level.
Oh,
That's
people
why
do
I'm
my
glad
boot
you
camp
call
for
it a
5.
boot camp, because it really is what it is, right?
Oh, you have no idea. Until you experience it, because like people are like at the one I just did Joe Free, like breakfast at 7 a.m. Well, 7 to 8. You could schedule your breakfast, but then class from 8 to 12:30, hour and a half break. Class from 2 to 6:30. Hour break. Dinner at 7:30 if you want to join us. But it's like it's very, and it's timed every hour, 10-minute break, back on track, right?
Well,
because it has to
you're
be timed.
famous for that. Sticking with the schedule.
Well, because, when you have multiple groups, if one class goes off schedule, just like just like at a conference, when you got 4 lecture tracks, 8 workshop tracks, and somebody thinks they're so fucking important that they got to go on for another 5 or 10 minutes because what they have to say is just so important, or they don't want to take a break because like I'm coming and I'm like, and they're like 5 minutes into what's supposed to be a break and the person's still talking. I'm like, what's going on here? And this instructor lawyer says to me, oh, we took a vote and we decided that we were just going to push through. I'm like, you took a vote? I said, who called for this vote? And then some of the guys back there is like, wasn't me. I'm like, there's no voting here, okay? This class breaks every hour for 15 minutes and we stick on the schedule. And if you guys want to take votes and you want a democracy and how this is run, you got to go to some place that has a big board of directors and it has about 40 people running it. And then your voice will count there. But for right now,
a defense firm, you mean?
but most programs are built by committee, right? And everybody has to agree. And the only person that can speak is if they're approved by the committee and they check all of our boxes and they have, and of course, don't do anything that's, anybody could frown upon or offend anybody, which is, okay, well, that is not Trial Lawyers University. I mean, we don't mean to be rude, but we just can't have all these.
Not that it will be purposely offensive, but.
Right, but if somebody gets offended, that's kind of on them, not on, because that's like it's like being embarrassed. It's like somebody can embarrass you. You can choose to allow yourself to feel less than, but that's a choice you make. And until you get over that, until you get control of your own emotions, don't try to push your problems off on other people, frankly, is how I look at it.
Cross-examination of the defendant in the defense's case in chief to affirm what the jury's feeling and thinking.
I've been going to Trial Lawyer University for years now. Huntington Beach, Las Vegas. It really is the only conference, I think, in the country. You can forget all the rest of them.
So Eric, besides, helping lawyers with their cases, consulting and running focus groups, you also find, time to write, which is amazing because writing is a really hard, to take ideas and concepts and put them onto paper so that somebody that can't hear your voice or see your face can understand what the hell you mean is no small feat. And so your first book you wrote, when did you write your first book?
It was in the 80s, and it was not aimed at lawyers in particular. I was still working with lawyers at the time, but I hadn't specialized yet. So it was a persuasion in the workplace. It was called The Human Factor at Work.
And what were the main concepts behind that book?
Most of it had to do with the use of effective language and connection with other people, the same basics we're talking about today.
Right. And, the importance of language. And then was your first book really aimed at trial lawyers? Was that Facts Can't Speak for Themselves?
No, I was asked to join as a co-author of a book that somebody else had written, but he came to a class of mine and said, okay, here's my manuscript for how to approach people in trial and be persuasive. I need you to rewrite all of the nonverbal and verbal stuff because your approach is better than what I've got here. So I was christened a co-author. The first book was called The Complete Litigator, and I co-authored it with a guy named Paul Lisnick. He used to be a professor at Loyola. He's a legal commentator on local news here.
In Chicago?
Yeah. After that.
Wow.
Yeah. After that, that's when the big book came out.
The big book that kind of, that book that, I guess it had to make, because I know trial guides.
Yeah, I was, actually, Anita published it.
Okay.
I spent a long time developing an approach to focus groups, which we still use today. It's been refined, but I spent about 9 years putting it together. 4.5 of those years, I was putting it down in paper in this book, while I was also training an associate of mine to deliver the same material. And it took quite a while. The end product is called Facts Can't Speak for Themselves, about revealing the story inside of the facts. Then 9 years later, they came back and said, would you revise it? And I said, sure. So the new version is called Facts Still Can't Speak for Themselves. Somewhere in the middle there, we put together a collection of essays that I'd written over 25 years and put it into a book called Persuasive Communication, 25 Years of Teaching Attorneys. And now I'm working on the new one, which deals pretty much exclusively with the material that we've been talking about. Post-truth deciders and their assumptions, and how to deal with impaired attention and how the two intersect to either help or hurt your case. It's called Assuming It to Be True.
And when can we expect that to be coming out?
Hopefully mid-fall, if everything goes as planned.
Have you selected a publisher yet?
There's a couple of people in the running.
I know, because there's more than one choice now. You got Trial Guides, you got AAJ Press, you got Anita. So one of my friends, like Philip Miller, he's like, Dan, you should start publishing. I'm like, that sounds like the biggest loser business I've ever heard, publishing books for lawyers. Like what a poor, he goes, I know, but he's like, some of these places, like they do nothing to help the speaker promote themselves.
Yep.
He's like, whereas like you have these stages, you let people
once the
speak
product's
and talk
produced,
about their
they
stuff.
kind of forget about you.
Right. And it's like, it's not exactly a huge market for a book for trial.
If you go into writing a book because you think you're going to make money off of it, you're doing it for the wrong reason.
Yeah. Well, pretty much most things you go into trying to make money.
Yeah, exactly.
It usually doesn't work that way. Usually it's finding something you're pretty excited about and passionate about and get really good at it. And you're like, wow, you get really, really good at something. It's amazing how the world can find a way to compensate people that get extraordinary at one simple thing. It's like one thing is all I want to do. One thing I can do well. But it's a kind of important thing. So the new book, the fall or a few months out now, you've worked on a lot of cases. So what are some of the cases that stand out most for like your most, I don't know, proud of, I don't know, whatever the word is, you know what I mean? Where you like, wow, my, there's some cases where you're like, man, but for my help, there's no way
Well,
That verdict is even where it is. Not to be ownership of things, but
let's put it
still.
this way. I have to temper my pride because I'm never the one standing up in front of the jurors. Okay. I
Right.
set you up, wind you up, and aim you at the jurors. That's my job, right?
Right.
The one that comes to mind first always is because it's the only one of its kind. I worked with a guy from Texas who's an excellent trial lawyer named Mike Doyle. They were working on a case representing a handful of American National Guard troops and some National Guard troops from England. I think the whole total was about 100 of them that had been injured in Iraq by our government and defense contractor from my home state of Texas, whose CEO was vice president at the time. They were restoring the
What was it? Halliburton?
Halliburton. Yeah, it
Halliburton?
was.
What a surprise.
Yeah.
What a surprise. Double dip,
Their job was to restore the Iraqi oil production so that they could make good on Paul Wolfowitz's promise to take all that money and pay for the war. Well, the way the Iraqis do oil is really weird. They had a pumping station at the bottom of the country in the south area in a place called Basra. And they have hundreds of miles of pipes that they send water through up to the oil fields, and they shoot water down into the ground and pull the oil out that way. Well, these pipes corrode, so they had to have something that was really powerful that kept them from corroding. And what they had at this plant, all over the plant, because it had been trashed during the initial fighting. So all over, there's this orange and yellow powder, stacks and stacks of bags full of it, broken bags everywhere, down to a depth of about 4 feet. It's called hexavalent chromium. Some people might remember that. It's the Aaron Brockovich chemical. These guys were all around it all day long. Sandstorms, walking in it, moving in it, picking things up that are covered in it. One guy dropped a sandwich and ate some of it. Well, the difficulty with that is it really doesn't like skin, whether it's inside you or outside you. And anything that can go wrong with your skin, including cancer, is a consequence of ingesting this stuff or getting it all over you. Here was the ironic part that we framed in the story, tested it in the focus groups, and knew that if it got across in the trial, it would work. And that is that the taxpayers, whose money, by the way, is going to indemnify the Defense Department and their contractor for any verdict they get against them. Those people had paid for, us, you and me, had paid for chem suits, Tyvek suits that these guys wore on their backs every day into that area. All they had to do was tell them, put on your suits, and nothing would have happened. But they didn't want to do that because they wanted to keep the threat a secret, because if they had to clean up the site, which eventually they had to do, they wouldn't have met their deadline for an $11 billion bonus. So they wanted to keep it all a secret and leave the troops at threat so that they could get their bonus. As it turned out, that was pointless. They cleaned up the site and still got the damn bonus anyway at the cost of all of these National Guard troops. That's the one and only plaintiff's verdict that I'm aware of against a U.S. defense contractor in time of war that was successful. None of the burn pit cases were successful. None of the abuse cases were successful. This is the only verdict that I'm aware of that anybody's ever gotten against a defense contractor. That one stands out a lot.
Wow. It's amazing. How many years did that case take? Years?
Oh, to set it up? Yeah, because there were so many hurdles to get over in terms of immunity. It was like 4 years to get to trial.
I can imagine the amount of delays.
It was interesting. The other one that stands out as a group of cases, the long delayed cigarette cases in Florida. After everybody else had adjudicated them all, Florida's appellate system finally let them come back. They had a handful of about 8,000 cases. Each had to be tried individually because it's like an MDL. Keith Mitnick asked me to come down and run a couple of focus groups because they weren't satisfied with the results they were getting. And that one worked out pretty well. The first case that was done after the focus groups is one of the 6 I've had in my career so far, where the jurors wrote down and assigned a larger verdict in punitive damages than the attorney requested. And the next, I think 10 or 12 of them all had mid to high 8-figure verdicts, except for one anomaly that was 9. But that was pretty consistent over time. And those cases were a perfect example of how framing the story works to be consistently persuasive in the mind of the decision maker. Those are the ones that come to mind when people ask.
Right, those cigarette cases. Those always seem like this guy, Alex Alvarez, who does a lot of cigarette cases, but he's actually developed this jury selection software and process he calls MOMIS. And so I'd
like to see that.
But like I got to know him a little bit and spend some time at his office. But he's going to be coming and teaching like a full day class on MOMIS at TLU Beach, and speaking on his process. Because I'm pretty stoked about that because he's very scientific, and because we had some different voir dire sessions going during this one. Like last year, I was trying something new and had like a voir dire room where it was like some great lawyers like Pat Selby Jr. out of Chicago. He did like a live med mal voir dire, and Nick Raleigh did a TBI voir dire, and Kurt Zahner did a premises voir dire, and Mike Alder did a voir dire on it was like an auto case with spine injury, and Maxie Shear did one on a TBI trucking case, I think, and Ben Rabinowitz on a wrongful death case. So I got these different personalities, and so they could get and I had different focus, a new focus group from everyone, so it could record them to have exemplars of better voir dire exemplars, for my TLU on demand site, plus for the people live there, right? And so he's like, I saw some of that, and he's like, I got a lot to offer, Dan. I'm like, all right, Alex, you bring it in. You see what that
that brings up something
Miami.
else. We didn't quite get through what you were calling the 4 pillars that are going to be the foundation for what's going to happen at the boot camp. Could you tell me a little bit more about those? Because we left off at interviewing the client for preparing for direct.
The Dark Arts Bootcamp, Omaha, Nebraska, September 9th through 13th. Dave Clark will teach you about the unconscious mind, conversational hypnosis, applying NLP to trial lawyering, how to embed stories in voir dire and throughout trial. And when you're not doing that, you'll be practicing with me and my coaches on your performance skills, creating the holograms, creating the connection, transporting the audience into the story. So they just don't hear the story, but they actually experience it. There's still 2 spots left. We'll see you there.
So the boot camp process, I've thought a lot, I've worked a lot on sequencing of skills. Like the sequence that you learn something has a very big effect on what your ultimate abilities tend to be and how fast you learn. And I think it's really important that people who are designing training programs design it so that the students get the results as quickly as possible, because that way they got to start, it's a lot of work. They got to feel like they're getting better, and that, and that one skill is building upon another skill. And so, we always start out with the training of cross-examination. And, people are like, well, voir dire starts. I'm like, well, voir dire is I think it's a more difficult skill because, to train cross, I believe there's about 10 skills that you need to master to be really good at delivering any cross. And some of them are basic, like leading questions only. 1 new fact per question. So training yourself not to ask compound questions unless it's intentional. I mean, like I ask an intentional, sometimes multiple 6-part question. I know it's getting objected to, but that's like my little mini closing of putting the facts together, because I have a concept the jury can't get in little chunks. But when I ask that long question, it's objected to. I'm like, oh, that's a great objection. Let me break it down for you now, right? So I get to repeat my question. The jury knows where it's going, and I got to do it twice in little pieces, so it's great. But but that's a skill to know that, to be able to loop, to establish a fact and repeat that fact in the next statement. So this is like this big connected link chain that is so easy to follow, because you have to assume people are going to lose attention. And when they do, if you're not constantly looping, you've lost them. Right. And then they're trying to figure out where they're at in the story. But again, that's a skill that I watched Dale Gallipo, who's a real great civil rights trial lawyer in LA, and I went and watched him try a case for a few days. And one thing he did constantly was looping those answers on cross and direct. Just they'd give an answer, he'd repeat it, and the guy's like, I got out of the car and I ran over and I grabbed him. And then so Dale's like, so when you grab him, then you take him, you throw him to the ground, right? And you got him on the ground, and then you put your knee on him, and your knee's on him. Then you're like, see his face changing colors. You know what I mean? So each question kind of began with the last one ended.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're building context, and stories don't have any sense if they don't have a context. If you don't give it to them, they're gonna wander into the wilderness.
Right. And so, but also, dropping the taglines like right, correct, isn't it true, true? Or if you use a tagline to create some space between the statement and the tagline, like, instead of like, Eric, you're driving south on US 411, true? Have it, like, Eric, so you're driving south on US 411, true? So then there's a little standoff for a moment. The jurors' minds get to process a bit, and then after just a couple of times, the person starts answering, right? And so now it's just like another control move, right?
Yeah, and the fun part about that one in particular, anytime you're saying true like that, or correct, or is that accurate, and you pause like that, you're inviting their suspicions to be aroused. And with half the jury pool, you're working with the highest level of suspicion I've ever seen. So it's a vein ready to be tapped by anything, even something as subtle as that. You arouse their suspicions, it's going to go right to that witness.
Right. And I personally think the tagline true is the best tagline, because correct has kind of a harsh sound, and you sound harsh.
Academic
right
too, yeah.
Whereas like true, it's like we're looking for the truth, and true kind of has like a warmth to it. And that's why I think it's better. But dropping all the filler words like and, so, okay, which majority of lawyers do, and they will continue to do until they train themselves to stop it, right? Until they're called out on it over and over and over.
Called out on it, because you don't know what to change if you don't recognize you're doing it. I can't tell you how many transcripts I've read where the lawyer in a deposition of an opposing professional witness, at the end of every answer says, okay, and moves on. Well, if you do that 100 times in front of the jury, what you're telling them is whatever that defense witness says is okay with me. There's no way to get around that influence if you put it out there. And just because it's a habit doesn't mean you can't change it.
Exactly. I mean, it has to be changed, but to cross-examine in the present tense. Now, I very rarely ever see a lawyer do this, because if we learn to cross-examine the present tense, it forces us to imagine the story, right? And it forces the witness to imagine the story, and it causes the jury to imagine the story. And it's the same question. So Eric, so when you're driving south on US 411, you pull over and you come to a stop. True? And so that way, you're visualizing. When you turn and look at your hands moving, the jury's looking to see your hand moving with your words. Well, it's creating an image in their mind with your hand moving, which is what we all do unconsciously when we tell stories from our own lives.
We always shift into the present tense. You can tell when somebody's engaged in the story by when they shift to the present tense. That's the natural version of it. All you're doing is inviting people to move into that story at that time by using the present tense. It's one of the many things you can do to catch people's attention back.
But the present tense has to be linked with the imagination. Yeah. That's why, I never tell people just to speak in the present tense, because then they tell a story in the present tense that's just as damn boring as it was in the past, right? It's just as the present tense, but it's just a boring story. There's no illusion. It's just what it is. But like to effectively use a flip chart, because people will not use a flip chart in trial unless they practice with it, unless they're comfortable with it. And so what I think is important, obviously, on a flip chart is learning how to write legibly, and then just putting one topic per page, and then learning how to control the where the jury looks. So when you look at it, you cause them to look at it. So you use it as a very good training tool. To be intentional with the pacing of our voice and our breathing. What I've seen, as soon as you say cross-examination, people start speeding up, they get real tense, and they stop breathing. And when they stop breathing, they try to give a 30-second statement on one breath, and they're running out of breath the last 10 seconds, and their
inflection falls
level
apart.
of volume is dropping off, and it sounds like they're insecure and they can't breathe, and they don't even realize it. I'm like, so I have to teach them intentionally. Here we breathe, and you have to make it noticeable, and then they, because obviously breathing is some sort of an unconscious thing. But again, what did that one guy say? It was real important, because until we can make the unconscious conscious, we'll call it fate, and it'll rule our lives. Right. I mean, that's what it's about. It's just training the breathing, but also training our emotional state, because I think there's only two core emotional states in cross, and that is curiosity when you're laying foundations, and disappointment when you're impeaching or showing bias. Right. That's about it. I mean, maybe 2% is other things like, tones or demeanors, but really those are the two that should dominate.
Yeah.
Right. Or like tragic, like, the worst of all, the jury could be deceived, into undervaluing the human harms and suffering that were caused. Okay. That's like the tragic, like this is bad, right? Yep. Talking about the consequences of a biased medical evaluation. But also then lastly, like kind of bringing the jury in, so that it's comfortable for you. Because I know as like a younger lawyer, even as like it's easy to ignore the jury on cross-examination because you're so focused on that witness. And then it's like you never look to see, but I think it's like I've seen some lawyers very effectively look at the jury quite a bit. But for most, I think, people asking questions to the jury is kind of, some people pull it off, but I think it's best that, really it's like, okay, when it's something really important and different, it's like, okay, folks, you need to pay attention to this. That's why I'm asking, directing this question towards you. Because if you do it all the time, it won't stand out. So it's kind of the, and we teach this cross in the context of a defense medical expert.
Yep.
And because everybody has, but it's a cross frame that can be used for any
expert.
Professional.
Yeah.
Any professional, because it lays out the foundation that, doctor, you're trained that a proper medical evaluation, it must be impartial. And then by impartial, what we mean is you're not an advocate for either side. And so we go impartial, objective, and complete versus a biased evaluation and the risk associated, the known risk associated with a paid expert's choice to conduct a biased evaluation, which is, I said the jury could be misinformed about the patient's condition. And then the loopings, they could not only just be misinformed, but they could also be, that's where you turn the jury, be misled as to the extent of the patient's injuries. But perhaps worst of all, Eric, they could be deceived into undervaluing the human harms and suffering that were caused. But then we transition that into the cross-examination of the defendant truck driver, because to teach the president, because like these skills are all interrelated. And so on the defendant truck driver, like everybody already knows the story, right? Because everybody's practiced the 3-minute opening with the use of the Google map. Because on the performance skills, I mean, most people that do any type of, vehicular injury cases, the most dominant visual is the Google map. Right. For opening, closing, cross-examination, direct. Where did this happen? And so since that's the most common visual and ubiquitous, it would probably make sense to, if you want to master the use of one visual,
with it.
this might be the one you choose, right? Since it's going to be in all of your cases and not just any case. And so, but it's really because to learn the performance skills, you teach people how to really imagine, and that's not easy. I said to him, imagine the truck going down the road. The guy looks, he goes, I don't see the truck. I'm like, that's the fucking problem. Like, you got to see the truck when you see it going down the road. You say it's going down the road, because if you don't see it, nobody else is going to see it, okay? And so, but it's a really cool case, though, because it's actually an ongoing case of Joe Freed's, which is, and it's a dash cam video, which makes it so much better, because I don't have to people tell, look at these facts, try to imagine the story. It's like, I'm showing you a damn video of the story and pictures from the scene. I can't do anything more than to help your imagination than have you witness what happened, right? But then we break down that into for teaching the performance skills into 4 chunks. So that way they're smaller chunks of 30 to 45 seconds. And each chunk is designed to practice a particular skill, starting out with, eye contact. People don't know how to make eye contact appropriately, especially when you got 14 people in front of you that all, need your attention. And, if you spend the first 2 minutes just talking to one juror, well, that's the exclusion of everybody else. Right. Whereas what I train people to do is stand up, kind of look at people and have sort of a neutral face, and their face slowly gets warm. And they say, good morning, everybody. again, my name is, and so that way, just face gets appropriately warmth, like, so the unconscious story to the jury is, we're old friends. We just happen to run into each other in this courtroom by your emotional state, right? But getting that little so I teach about a micro connect, like look at each juror in the eyes just for the fraction of a second. So you can literally look at 14 people and just get that touch in the eyes in 3 seconds.
And you can get an acknowledgement even in that period of time. This is one of those basics that I was talking about earlier, because I've seen too many people that have some concerns about, say, 3 or 4 jurors on the panel, and they will consistently look over that person to make contact with the one next to them or in front of them, but they never look at that person. So they're actually leading that person to disrespect what it is you're delivering to them and not even know it. That eye contact thing where you hit every juror before you go back to the first one, it takes some practice, but it pays off in ways that are incalculable.
Right. Or another thing too, with the same thing is like, if I'm going to do the trucks going south, then I start with the juror on the far left. I look at each juror's eyes as it's going past them with my hand just underneath my chin. And so that way it's like moving with it. And it's like a visual cue too.
Now you're helping them see the damn truck.
Right. But I'm dragging them by their eyes by connecting from left to right if my illusion's on the right, and from right to left if I'm using stage left and I want them to look over here, I'm basically taking them by their eyes. I'm saying, come follow me. I got something to show you, but it's over here.
Right.
Because it's a truck. And if I put the truck right in front of you, well, you won't imagine it because you're not going to imagine yourself being run over. And then if I'm making the truck go down the road right towards you, well, you can't see me anymore because there's a truck there. So like, you're not going to imagine shit. You're going to listen to words, and hopefully I'm going to hope you remember them, and then also training people to make eye contact before they start talking to somebody. And when they're done, pause for a moment, find that next juror, not just the person next to them, but intentionally find somebody over here, and then over here, then kind of weaving the jury together, and never talking to any juror twice until you talk to every juror once. No jurors 3 times until twice. So in training, we train ourselves to be inclusive of that entire group. All right, because it's so easy to just talk to people that want to talk to you, especially when you're nervous, right? And like to get rapport with somebody who might be somewhat looking like they're not that interested, or getting
That's the guy you need.
I know. Well, yeah, but that's easy to say, not so easy to do in the context of the battle. But
hence the need to practice.
Practice, right? Or like practicing controlling our facial expressions, especially like when people are like, does that make sense? And there's no inflection in their voice. There's no raising of the eyebrows. There's nothing in their face or tone that tells you it's a question. Right. It's only you have to figure out after you process for about 3 seconds, a second or two, like, oh, that's a question.
If I'm willing to do it.
Like, right. Then I'm putting more work on you, as opposed to like, does this make sense? And and my hand extends out to you, and my fingertips extend at the same time as my voice inflects and my eyebrows raised. And then now I'm interested in you, right? And I want and I'm waiting for you to give it back to me.
And he's used to those cues. So the response is so much easier and so much more likely to come out. You can get people actually talking to you when they shouldn't be talking to you during an exam. You ask the witness, does that make sense? And one of the jurors will say, yeah. If you've connected with them, I've seen that happen.
Say it again when you say does that make sense?
Does that make sense? And a juror answers.
Oh, no, that's the best. I saw Brian Panch do this one time. They'll get the jury involved because he was doing some math with the expert about how much money he made per hour, on this case. And he's like, 7,550 plus 15,200. And he's like staring at it. He's like, the juror yells out the answer. He's like, oh, thank you. I'm like Brian Panch is one of the smartest guys I ever met in this entire world, with one of the best minds of any, 65-year-old walking the face of the earth. Right. There's no way and let me tell you, one thing he's good with is numbers. So one thing he understands is numbers.
Oh, dear.
And so he's like, Ambrose, I get the money. I'm like, yes, Panch, I'm aware of that. Yes, we're aware of that. We see the numbers. But anyways, but also another thing too is people, just with their hands, what they do with their hands is so, like they get so much tension in their hands. It's the weirdest thing. And then when they're standing in front of a jury, they're always got, like 2 hands bouncing down by their sides. So they're always talking like blah, 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 blah all the time, which to me is crazy because we can only connect one person at a time, right? And so if our hands are constantly down here as we're talking to people, first of all, the only time ever our hands move like this, shaking up and down like this, is when we're frustrated or angry, like, especially as children, like, why can't I do this? Or what the fuck's wrong with you? And so that's like, to me, that's like the unconscious story that keeps coming out when your hands go like this. Whereas since we can only connect with one person at a time, it would be logical for us to train ourselves to use one hand and keep our one hand between ourselves and the person we're connecting with, then find that next person, make eye contact, connect with them, and then, work our hands into the connection, so that way we have a physical, not just the eyes and voice, but something physical constantly drawing people towards our faces. Not just the person we're talking to, but all the other jurors too, because of the mirror neurons. So that we say, tell me more about your mom and how she helped you become the person you are. Not tell us more about your mom and how her brutal honesty helped you, bitch. Right. You know what I'm saying? But what you're saying with the expression on your face, right? Because like the only people that are brutally, because like one of the voir dires we teach is a brutal honesty voir dire. And, a lot of people say brutal, it's such a bad word, but it's like tell me, because part of it's like, I know we all have somebody in our lives that if we looked up brutal honesty in the dictionary, we'd see their face right there. And I have like and I look at my little hand and open that book and have a warmth on my face, like somebody who loves you, somebody who cares about you. Now this person could be a coach, a teacher, or maybe a best friend. And then people tell the stories of that person. So we kind of bring up that person in their lives that gives it, that cared about them, right? So, like learning that, in the performance skills. So that's cross and performance. But then, the witness preparation, because we have the burden of proof, and most people are just terrible at. I mean, that's the one area that very few people ever lecture on or speak on, because I think the learning from it is just so far behind on how to prep witnesses, and because most people that we that we're representing have been tragically injured, and for a trial lawyer's purpose, a plaintiff's lawyer's purpose, just to be honest about it, you hear about a crash and somebody calls you, oh man, my husband got in this terrible wreck, this FedEx truck hit him and this car flipped over, and you're like, what happened? Like, this car was totaled, what happened to him? Oh, he walked away. He just got a little scratch on his arm. And inside you're like, fuck, why me, right? Why is it me? It's like when I was a criminal defense lawyer, it was like I get these people calling me up, yeah, I just got caught with a pound of cocaine. I'm like, my eyes light up, like, good, a cocaine dealer. He's got some money. He's like, tell me, he's like, this is the first time I ever tried dealing. I'm like, why do I always get the coke dealers on their first novice coke dealer? Why can't I get out, where's my Al Pacino, my drug lord I could charge $100,000 to? It's just so unfair. It's so unfair. But the witness prep, the reality is that, deposition is usually a couple years after the event, maybe 2 or and trials even further. And these people that have been hurt so bad, we all do the same thing as human beings, is to repress it, so that way you can smile again and focus on everything that makes you happy, like your children and your grandchildren or whatever they are, instead of the misery of the life that's been taken from you. Well, to prep these people, you have to go in and basically pull the Band-Aids off and force them to feel it again, to suffer again, and so that the jury can feel it. And so many people are afraid to do that, because whether they'll say it or not, they're afraid that if they go back down that dark hole,
they won't come out.
They won't come back out.
Right.
They'll get stuck in that darkness. And so that's why it's so important to get the rapport in prepping witnesses, to say, come with me.
Yep.
Come follow me. I'll go into that dark room, that dark space with you instead of hell. And we're going to talk about it, unpack it. But then we're going to come back out. We're going to shut that door. Right. And you're going to smile again. And it's all going to be good. And so that way, because when I teach people, to be great witnesses, what I'm really teaching them to do is to transport. Like I give the metaphor of Scotty in Star Trek. I said, you're going to be like Scotty in Star Trek, where you push a button and you're going to disappear in one place and reappear in another place in time. And we're going to transport you back in space and time so that you can re-experience the crash or the fall. And then also when we talk about how it affected your life, because I said, if the jury was there at the side of the road, saw what happened, and they were with you in the hospital, and they were with you at your home as you struggle to get better, is there any doubt in your mind they would find for you and properly compensate you? And of course, the person better say no, or you got a fucking problem. You should settle the case. But it takes a lot of practice and a lot of skill
Well, and
to get that
that's when it comes to
person there.
developing the story. If you don't do that work with that witness, especially the injured plaintiff, you don't know the story. There are aspects of the story that could be incredibly powerful that are hidden underneath that bushel where they don't want to look. But if you get them out by establishing rapport, connecting with them, inviting them to go down that road, and that takes more than one try. You know this. Okay, some guys will go in there, okay, I've got 30 minutes to get his whole story out at his kitchen table, and then I'm not going back to his house again. That ain't going to work. But if you learn their story their way, you've got a brand new tool you can use to connect with the jurors.
Oh, and then, because when I do it, like I always have people start off by telling me a happy story from their lives that predated the incident. And they're like, what's the example? They're like, I don't have any happiness. I'm like, so, anything where like you think about it and causes you to smile. Like one that I always use is, a parent teaching their child to ride the bike for the first time, right? But it has to be an event. It can't be like something. How about my graduation, my kid's graduation? No, that takes too fucking long. There's no really excitement at all, right? But when everyone kind of remembers riding their bike for the first time, and like when it like the sense of freedom and the fact that you're not falling over and you're pedaling, and it's like this. It's an amazing thing because everything you ever try to balance on just fell. But realizing and so that way they get to experience that moment of joy and watching that. And so they know what it feels like. And I typically videotape them doing this. I tell them we're going to videotape the first couple stories, and you do it with your eyes closed. And of course, that always feels weird to people. I'm like, these are I call it training wheels for the mind. Because if you have your eyes open, you'll see it, people's reactions and to your story, and that might affect your story, right? And I also tell the people if there's an audience there, like if I'm training, I'm like, make sure you don't react to this person's story no matter what. Because then they're going to react to your reaction, right? There's something funny, you start laughing, they're like, oh, now it's not like, okay, now they think they have to be funny. Now they're on some stage somewhere instead of just experience it. Because then after we go through that, then we always go through the story of the tragedy. But the story of the tragedy, I'm like, it's like to tell the story for the happy story, I'm like, okay, where are we at when it happens? Because they're like, oh, Alaska. I'm like, no, specifically, okay, I'm standing on an icy, on an ice skating rink in my backyard, and okay, what's the weather's like? Okay, it's snowing, it's raining, it's doing this, whatever it's doing, right? And then it's like, what time of day or night? Who else is there? What are you wearing? Things to focus, and so I can direct the story.
What can you see?
Right?
What can you hear? What do you smell?
Right. So I got to be able to be there with them, so that I got to be the director. But then after we do that and we review it and they understand it all, then for the crash, I'm like, okay, where are we at? Okay, they're like, I was on Southfield Road and I came to a red light. Okay, so you're on the road and you come to this light. Then what happens? Like I'm sitting there and I look in my rearview mirror. I'm saying, so when you look, what do you see? Anyway, so like they like start this, the next thing you know, they tell the whole story of the crash. It takes them like 10 minutes. They're like, okay, I'm ready now to close my eyes. I'm like, you don't need to close your eyes anymore, okay? You know how to transport yourself with your eyes open. So now they get the confidence of being a great storyteller. And whatever they're doing, I'm always telling them, you're doing great, Eric, you're doing great. Even like folks, even they're doing shitty, you got to tell people they're doing great because they got to believe in themselves, right? They have to believe they can do this.
Scary territory.
Then after,
I said it's scary territory. You need reassurance.
Right, and exactly, and to get the confidence, because then after we get the story out, then I got to practice, teach them to transition that flowing narrative into, and then also I tell them too, I'm like, look, you're the star of the story, I'm the director. The star must listen to the director, because only one person can star and direct their own movie and win the Academy Award. And who's that person? And half the time they'll say themselves, me. I'm like, no, Clint Eastwood, okay? You're not Clint Eastwood, and I'm not Clint Eastwood. So you're going to be the star, and I'm going to be the director, okay? Like, okay, I got it. Because then too, like, if I you have to kind of watch them, right? If I think they're not there, then I'll be like, okay. Like I always use I always do with people too is like the room that we're in before we get started. I said, close your eyes and look around and show us what you see, so that we can, show us where everything's at in the room. And and their hands, it's like, there's windows over here, and there's these big squares on the floor, and the ceilings got these lights on and stuff. And they're like picturing their hands are moving, right? Yeah. So that way, and I do the same thing facing them, and I say, but see how that these windows. Let's say it was you. These windows are in front of you, but they're behind me, and you can't see it up here, but the fridge is over here on the right, but it'd be to your left. I said, that's because I said, none of these things have changed. Just you and I have different perspectives on the story. So we just need the story from your perspective. Because by the time they got to deposition, they know everything about their case from all these different sources, and it kind of commingles in their brain to one idea. Next thing you know, they're testifying to shit that they don't even know. And if any astute attorney, the defense attorney, would be like, wait a minute, you just adopted that from someplace else. That's not you. That's not the truth. You're just making shit up. So that can be real detrimental. So, but after we do all the witness prep, then I'm like, now we got to convert this to direct examination. I said, it's a very simple, the question and answer format. I said, because facts of the case are sort of, for the jury, are like me and pizza. Like, I love pizza. If I shove a whole slice in my mouth at once, I'm going to choke on it. Well, the jury needs the information, but we got to give it to them in bite-sized pieces so they can digest it. That's the word I was looking for. So then I use my phone. I say, for example, if I say to you, Eric, my phone is green. Isn't that true? What would you say?
No.
It's green, right? Just look at it.
No, it isn't.
See, and I say, exactly. Notice your demeanor. You're not being defensive, although your first no sounded a little defensive. But I'd be like, you're not being defensive. You're talking to me like I'm confused. Either I'm colorblind or I don't understand the meanings of the words black versus green. But either way, I'm not a bad guy. And that defense lawyer, he's not a bad guy either. He's just confused, and we're going to unconfuse him. Okay? And then we're just like, yeah, let's unconfuse that motherfucker. And then I tell him, look, whenever you're asked a question, either by myself or, your lawyer or the defense lawyer, if I'm just consulting on the case, I said, first, make sure you understand the question. And if you don't, ask for clarification. Then ask yourself, what image must I access in order to answer the question? Then, while accessing the image, answer the question. When you're done, close the image up, come back to me, and I'll know you're ready for the next question. And so, simple format, right? And so, obviously it takes practice, but then after a little practice, because then usually, especially if it's always helpful if the person has, if their spouse is with them, because I keep them in the training too, and so that way, talk about this stuff, right? Talk about it. See how, help practice the telling of these stories just so that they flow naturally, right? And so
one of the things you can
so
do,
that's kind of like
one of the things you can do to enhance that I've done over and over again with witnesses is the space between seeing the image of what they need to talk about and to answer the question. If you have a connection with them and you breathe in as you tell them to look at the image, they'll breathe in too. And the more oxygen they get, the better their brain works. It's easier for them to actually visualize it. If you tell them to breathe, it confuses them and takes them off track. But they'll follow you breathing in if you've already got a connection with them. So you can use the nonverbal and the verbal to the best effect with the witness.
That's interesting because, I'd say, but when I get started, I always tell them when I close their eyes and think now.
Yep. See,
5 deep
there
breaths.
it is.
Feel yourself. So then I get in sync with their breathing, right? So I'm just getting rapport. Feel yourself relaxing a little bit more with every breath.
Right.
Feel your face relaxing. So, because obviously we need to transport them, right? We need to, we all know how to transport ourselves when we're not thinking.
We're not thinking.
Right? Right. When it's just our own story. That's why people say, tell like you're telling a person in the bar.
Right.
But what they're really saying is tell the story like you don't give a shit about anything except your story. You're not trying to move anybody. You're not doing anything. You just want to share the story of what happened to you because you can't fucking believe what happened to me, right? And so that to me is what they mean by that is to making the unconscious conscious. And then, finally on voir dire, I really teach 3 scripts of voir dire. And the first one I call beginning the process, right? So, because the first time is so critical that I don't think, to me, it just, especially if you're a younger lawyer, you can't leave it to chance that you're just going to be in rapport, right? So, and so there's the beginning of the process, which, it really is now, folks, now we need to ask you all some questions about your opinions, your beliefs, and your experiences so that we can help all of you decide if this case will be the right case for each and every one of you. Would this be okay with everybody? And so, that's just, but again, explains what the process is. And it's opinions, beliefs, and experiences. That's stepping, of course, right? Because experience is the most influential, how people be in. Opinions are the weakest, and beliefs are somewhere in the middle. But when you like that, and explain because the rest of that is, so that's segment 1. And segment 2 is because the reality is that every case is right for every juror. That's a true statement, isn't it? And that's why we all go through this process called jury selection. So that's inclusive. We all, with the sweeping hand, called jury selection. And that's also why, and now glance, just look at the judge, read us all the list of the potential witnesses, and introduced all of us to the parties. Now you look over to your client, everybody looks at your client, and even to the attorneys. Because could you imagine if you knew one of the witnesses, or perhaps maybe you were friends and your face warms up, right? So you activate those friends with one of the parties, or even one of the lawyers. I mean, can we all see how this could cause some potential bias? And, and teach people, whenever you ask a rhetorical question, you got to leave some space there, right? And have an inquisitive look for the people to process the question and come up with an answer.
And don't turn your back and don't move. You have to let them process and don't interrupt it because they're easily distracted these days.
Right. And I said, does everybody know what we mean when we say bias? And then, so people are like, well, you're supposed to get the jury talking. I'm like, I know that. But first first we're listening to each other. We're getting them comfortable. And then, it's only that first script is only a minute, 20 seconds. It ain't, you know what I mean? And it explains it, and so it really lays out the why we're doing this, the why, lowering their cognitive load. This is why we're prying into your life, because we're empowering you to decide if you want to be here, right? Not so that we can judge you, so that we can, that's my jury empowerment move, right? And then, then the next part is like, Eric, how would you define bias? And so now, like a leaning. Oh, thanks, Eric. Now, John, Eric said, it's kind of like a leaning. And I look at you and I say that, and you're like, oh, wow, you listened to me and made me feel important. Thank you so much, Mr. Lawyer. And all that, wow, this fucker listens, right? And so these are the skills that must be taught in a very confined space and practice over and over. If everybody's practicing the same script, people are like, oh, I don't like scripts. I can't memorize. I'm like, shut the fuck up, okay? You memorize for the bar exam, and it's like, if you get up there and you don't know what you're gonna say before you say it, you think some brilliance is just gonna spout out of your mouth without you practicing and rehearsing it beforehand, and the expression on your face, the pace of your voice, the movement of your hands, and it's gonna work to its optimal effect, you're freaking nuts, right? It doesn't work that way. People say, oh, I rise to the occasion in trial. Like, you don't rise to shit. You sink to your lowest level of training when you're nervous and, all this stuff. So
stress
anyways,
is not
it takes a lot
a big
of
help
practice
to communication.
No, it takes practice. That's why, we have small groups, and, every performance is recorded and broken down, and, we divide the hour into, 5 equals paces. So no matter, everybody gets the same amount of time up there, right? So some people, believe it or not, some people spend all this money and come here and to work on their cases, and they don't do shit to prepare for the skills, right? And so to me, that boggles my mind, because, even from a fiduciary responsibility of people, best investing their clients' money, because, like our boot camps, 10 grand, and people are like, wow, that's a lot of money. I'm like, it all depends what you're getting for the money, right? If you're getting 5 days of consulting with, I'm sure that, I don't know what you charge for consulting, but I'm sure it's more than $2,000 per day. But also having a mastermind group, be working on your case, and you're working on your case throughout the program and beforehand, both the strategy and the performance
with
of it.
enough time to actually accomplish something, okay? Most people these days, they're not interested in even doing an hour on the web, but you're not going to get a skill out of that. You can't do that.
Right. You need, to get the skill, you have to have an accurate mental representation of what it's supposed to look like. So somebody has to show you what it's supposed to look like, and then let you try to do it. And then when you fail and you miserably mess it up, show you, okay, this is what you need to correct. Then you do a little better. Then you correct. Then you do a little bit better. And as people get up and they perform something and they're like, God, that's really bad. They get frustrated. I'm like, look, that may have not felt right. Yep. And there was a lot of things we need to work on. But that rep right there, that's one rep closer to greatness. That's one rep closer to being an unconscious performer.
Talk about directors and actors. One of the greatest acting teachers said, fail big, fail gloriously on your way to succeeding.
Right. I'm like, this is the step that's on your path. You must take this step. There's no way around this awkwardness. This is life. Okay? People are like, doesn't feel comfortable. I'm like, it doesn't feel comfortable. Does losing feel comfortable? Does being shitting your pants up there when you stand up in front of a jury, does that feel comfortable? No. But nothing feels comfortable when you first do it, right? But it takes the preparation, practice, constant feedback. Like whenever I present, for state trial lawyers associations, because actually I'm pretty stoked because I have one coming up in Wisconsin and in Pennsylvania where I'm both doing workshops like the day before and the day after. They're one-day things. And then, because I really feel sometimes hypocritical about lecturing about performance skills, because the whole point is you have to get off your asses, people. You have to get up. You have to try things. Yet I'm telling you, but I'm lecturing to you about doing this while you're sitting on your asses. It's kind of a paradox, right? It's like, I feel like a bit of a, but I'm like, I'm trying to motivate you here, right? Because what I'm telling you is going to go in one ear and out the other, sadly, unless you practice it. And so it's trying to get people to motivate, get past it. And, and I tell them, like, look, don't lose your case. And it's all a very legitimate case cost because you're going to multiply the value of your case. And besides having like a brain trust working on your case, right? And focus working on it before and after. So it's, anyways, it's going to be great, Eric. It's going to be great. I'm really fired up that we're doing this because like you and I have known each other for how long? Because you reminded me of that.
It's back to the early 90s.
Right, because you were telling me that, you remind me of this, which,
your sister reminded me
memory.
of it. I didn't think about this until we were at Huntington Beach, and she was going to do an intro, and she said, tell me some unusual thing, an unusual time you had with Dan. And it popped into my head that you used to have me come out to your firm out in Royal Oak, all the way from Ann Arbor on Sunday morning to talk to the crowd of young lawyers there. I have no idea how you got them to come out on Sunday morning, but they were there every week.
I said this brilliant trial consultant named Eric Oliver is coming out here. You need to beat your asses in the seat. Don't tell me about church.
I think it's more likely that withheld paychecks were involved.
I don't know. Maybe. I don't know if because I had a couple people work for me back then, but I realized one thing. I am not a good manager of people. This is not my strong skill. So I try to make my life now with as few other people I have to be accountable for as possible. So, all right, Eric, good catching up with you. And I'm really looking forward to this. And
what are the dates?
We're going to have the greatest. Oh, the boot camp. Oh, totally. I think it's October 27th to November 1st.
That's what I thought,
I believe. Yeah. It goes Tuesday. Everybody gets in on Monday. So it goes Tuesday to Saturday. And it's right here in Vegas because I have this condo. I have a condo upstairs. So those are really the two training areas, and it's going to be like, I'm super stoked, especially because the weather's great that time of year. And normally I'd be doing my big Vegas event at this time of year, but I decided to take a year off of Vegas, just work on things like my boot camps and my trial skills. Because I'm going to trial on November 15th, so we're going to be able to work on that case too and storyboard that one. And I'm really stoked about it because, it's a police jail abuse case. It's just horrible. And it's all on video too. It's the most offensive. This guy's a paraplegic and these cops are dumping him on the ground, slapping him across the face, dragging him, pulling him by his leg in the wheelchair, like pulling a hand by his leg. I mean, it's the most despicable, egregious.
You got a video?
There's video of it too. The fact it's all in video. But these people are so cavalier.
Yep.
These cops in this jail and so used to this abuse, and rightfully so, because the Attorney General of Oregon investigated it and recommended charges be filed for assault against the officer because that guy's handcuffed behind his back and he's in the jail cell and the cop, bam, hits him across the face. He goes, oh, it was a compliance technique. I'm like, compliance? The guy's handicapped and he's got his hands behind his back, handcuffed. And so I think it was recommended for prosecution, but the local prosecutor, of course,
dumped it,
declined the prosecution. Yep. But then it was investigated by the jail, and they did find it was a violation. And so his penalty, of course, was 1 day suspended without pay. But then he got a promotion the next week to make up for it. So
I'm surprised he survived.
Those are the backstories of things that. What?
I said I'm surprised the poor cop survived a whole day.
Oh, I know. And that's why I can't wait to these cops that did this, like the cross-examination. I'm very excited for it. I'm looking forward to it, very much so. And I'm looking forward to our class, Eric. So that'll be it. You have yourself Eric, if people want to get a hold of you, how do they get a hold of you?
I'm on LinkedIn. You can also get me direct on my email. It's eric@eric-oliver.com, eric-oliver.com. Eric with a C.
All right. And if anybody needs to get a hold of me, Dan at Trial Lawyers University, or my cell is 248-808-3130.
Oh, I forgot to mention too, if you don't have TLU on demand and you want to try out like a 30-day complimentary test drive, that way you can see those. What did you give? You gave a presentation with Scott. You said you gave another presentation. You gave a couple other presentations. And you did a workshop at Beach.
Yeah.
You did a workshop there too, right?
Yeah, it's all the stuff that's in the book.
Right. So you can catch his past performances at TLU. You've been coming to TLU for a while. I mean, because I remember you came in 21, 22.
Yeah, I think it's 3 years. It might have been 4, but I think it's 3 years.
3 years in Vegas you came, for sure.
And then
remember
this
that.
is the first year at the beach. That's a really, really memorable
The beach
conference.
is the best. What? No, the beach is so far the best. People are like, oh, I love Vegas. I'm like, Vegas is shit compared to being at the beach, okay? Being inside some huge convention center and like, I mean, it was great, as it could be, but it's still indoors. It's still recycled air. There's no sunshine in that room. Whereas at the beach, like, everything feels like it's outdoors. Every break you're outside.
And everybody in the building is with you.
That helps too, because that's one thing I like about Caesars. They let all these other people come into my space. You know, just because I had 1% of the hotel, I'm like, get rid of these other 99%ers. We'd like to have our own space. So we got it dialed in for next year.
Right.
That's June 3rd through 6th. All right.
See you soon.
You have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Ready to train with the Titans and set records with your verdicts? Register for our live conferences and boot camps at triallawyersuniversity.com. Start getting your reps in before the big event by going to tluondemand.com to gain instant access to live lectures, case analysis, and skills training videos from the trial lawyer champions you love and respect, as well as pleadings, transcripts, PowerPoints, and notes for a roadmap to victory. Join the group that continues to get extraordinary results. Trial Lawyers University, produced and powered by LawPods.